Hi, I'm Roland, and welcome back to Practical Plastic. So today we are going to get started building this beast of a kit, the Revell London Bus in 1/24 scale, 370 odd parts in here, full interior, full engine, choice of two different engines you can build. So really interesting subject, very different from anything else I have done or anything else in general for that matter, but just an iconic vehicle. Saw this 2 years ago and had to add it to the stash. So I've been saving it, as I said in the full open kit review episode prior to this. So I've been saving this for a special occasion, and now that I am on episode 51, since the open kit review was episode 50, episode 51, we're going to build this guy up. So, got my tea, got a cool kit, ready to go. All right, so as usual, since I already did the detailed open kit review, I will do a quick tour through the parts, and then it's straight in. So, as always, thank you for watching. Please do hit that subscribe button, hit the alert, like, share, all that good YouTube stuff. And we're going to dig into something cool. Alrighty. So let's take a look at what's in this big box. Now, I did do in the preceding episode, I did do a full open kit review, as I'm now doing with the channel. I'll do a separate episode really looking at the parts. In case you did not catch that, just going to go through that real quick right now, starting with instructions. They are the, let's say, older version of Revell Germany instructions because of the way they're laid out, but they are not in full color print like the newer ones. But they do give you a nice history of the bus and typical Revell Germany type instructions, just laying everything out step by step, detail guide, so very nice. And then moving into the plastic, we do get the cab, the upper front and the rear of the bus. I'm just leaving my little VW Rabbit here as my measuring stick for comparison for the scale of this kit and everything in there. A lot of clear parts because it's a bus, but they all look very clear and no distortion. They usually do a very nice job with the clear parts in these Revell Germany kits, so I'm just keeping them in the clear baggies so they do not get scratched. Parts for one engine option, crisp, clean, looking good. Now we do get a number of very large sprues here, and as you can see, there is some warpage on some of these sprues, but because the kit goes together in multi-layers, frame, chassis on the pan, we'll see the floor pan in a moment, these warpages or these warps in the parts should all self-correct, because when you're doing things in layers, to get those layers to all line up, they all need to be flat. So that should work out. Mold detail looks very nice. We have some ribbing for floor. Looks like the beading where upholstery edges are, even heater grate along the side of the bus. That's all very cool. We have, I'm assuming this is probably like a rubber mat. So obviously lots of painting to be done. We do get separate interior side panels for the bus, but what's good to see, prominent locators for all those seats. So that should work out well. This is the floor of the second deck where the stairs will come up, and here again we have nice floor detail, heating, something like this. You can just paint the whole thing silver, clear coat it, and then come back with black wash, and boom, in one shot we can pick out all those details on that heating grate, and that should be a really nice detail in the finished kit. And now getting a little bit more into how this will work out size-wise. This is one side of the bus. The cab will mount up front. This will go in the rear, and this will be the front top. So it's a bus. It's a double-decker bus and a 1/24 scale. It's just all sorts of awesome. So there we go. We have our steps. Step molding is very nice, as with the rest of the kit. Lots of good surface detail. Revell. Well, actually, I don't know if it's Revell, but there are kits for photo etch to add additional detail to the kit. I am not jumping into that. My immediate impression is there is plenty enough detail here to work with. So, and I'm not the biggest fan of photo etch anyway. Yes, it can look great and it can do a lot to highlight detail, but personally, I can find it to be a pain to work with. So, back to the parts. Engine option number 2, again, nice and crisp. I love that we get 2 full complete engines with the kit. So, going to build them both, going to paint them both, and one will just be a separate little display. So here we go with seat frames, 2 copies of this. As I said in the open kit review, I'm really happy they did this way because we can paint all the frames, then we can paint all the seat cushions, and I'll show you the decal sheet in a minute. So doing the seats, yes, it'll be highly repetitive because it is a bus, but in terms of putting these seats together, the fact that the frames can be painted, the seats can be painted, and then the decals for the seat fabric detail should make this a repetitive but relatively straightforward and simple task. And that's good news. And we have some more detail pieces. These are a lot of handrails for inside the bus going up that iconic spiral stair to the 2nd level. And then we get 2 copies of this sprue. The seats, as I was mentioning, wheels, seat stands, all of these. So, you know, in terms of, again, doing the painting, can snip this section free, paint those, snip these seats free, paint those. The wheels will then be separate, paint those. So this should, while, tongue-tied. While this requires a lot of painting to get it done, the approach to painting looks to be fairly straightforward thanks to the way the kit was molded in terms of those seat frames, having these big sections of similar things. So thank you, Revell. That is nice to see. And one last sprue with the back of the bus, and, or is that the front? That may be the front. Sorry. Yes, that is the front. Upper front, and more details for steps and whatnot. Yes, the kit technically, the kit is technically molded in color, dark gray versus lighter gray, but everything's got to be painted. And then last but not least, we have this absolutely epic decal sheet. I've never seen a decal sheet this big. And what's cool about it is in this quilt of decals, we have all the decals for the seat fabric detail, which is really great. So this, like I said, when it comes time for the seats, just paint the seat pieces, the frames, put these decals on, and the seats should look fantastic. So that is good to see. We also have all sorts of little placards and decals, gauges. We have some gauges, more placards, and then over here, route decals, and then the big advertisement decals for the sides of the bus. And that does it. So, as far as paint scheme, it's a London bus. It's got to be red. So, there we go. Going to be a lot of airbrushing with this. So, you'll see me doing that. But other than that, It's just like any other kit. You know, if you're looking at this and you think, boy, that's a whole lot of plastic I just raced through. Yes, it is. But all of that plastic is no different than the plastic to build this great little kit. So this VW Rabbit. And the approach is the same. You know, you go through your steps. With bigger kits, one of the things I really look to do is sub-assemblies, engines, things like that. You know, getting back to these seats, because this is going to be a repetitive assembly, highly repetitive. What I like to do with repetitive assemblies, I mentioned this when I did the Ryefield Panther tank, is I do these concurrent with other things I'm doing. So I'll do a little bit of seat work and then do engine, transmission, you know, suspension, whatever. This way it breaks it up. So it's not like at a certain point of the build, I'm building 40 seats, whatever the number may be, somewhere around there. So it's not like a drudgery of going through that. So instead, it's exciting to see the collection of stuff gradually growing until it's all ready to go. And then when it's time to do the seats, it will just be a matter of cushion to frame, frame to legs, and onto the floor. So there we go. Okay, so here we see some of the side art from the bots for painting suggestions. And now getting to sprue cleanup. Now I just did a video on sprue painting and different painting and building techniques, strategies I should say. And here I just figured I'd show a little bit more of that painting on the sprues, but removing all the things that you need. So here looking at these chair frames, all these support brackets in there, they all can be removed and you end up with the open frames. And the idea here is to remove as many sprue contacts as possible. These pins on the side is where the seats will attach to the side, the inside of the bus. And with that in mind, we can remove the sprue from the opposite side of the seat and then hide our nub mark against the inside of the bus so that we will not see that once these seats are removed. And you want to remove as much sprue as possible so that you can get in there with your paint and end up like this, bare bones, just 2 contact points, which leaves a lot of stuff laying on the table. And here as well with the body sides, I'm going to take these pieces out. And now moving to larger pieces, we're going to remove this top frame because the top of that inside piece is a painting visible surface. And this whole floor section, you know, we really don't need that attached because it's pretty obvious what it is, so the whole thing can be removed, which adds to our pile of debris here, and that's okay. That can be bagged up and put aside. And now we can see just basic overlay of how this structure goes. Frame, the chassis pan goes on top. Then we will have the floor pan sitting in there. The crew cab up front, driver's cab. Then we will have the roof for the lower level, the floor for the upper level, roof for the upper level, the front cab portion of the upper level, and the rear cab portion for the back. Okay, so been doing some painting and I'll go over what I've done, but I wanted to jump in just real quick and talk about what you can do with some very simple spray painting. Now, I will preface this by saying, yes, I know there are some people in the hobby that, you know, their blood runs cold and they fall off their chair when they see people using Rust-Oleum in particular, but rattle can paints for doing their work. I will just say this. You know what? Yes, these spray out heavy as opposed to the Tamiya spray cans, which are hobby intended. But if you understand how these are delivering paint and you realize how to stand off when you spray so that you're not up close, these work just fine. Now, on 1/24th or 1/25th scale or larger for that matter, I really don't think these are a good fit in most applications for 1/35th scales, and I would assume smaller. I haven't done smaller, but certainly at 1/35th. Reason being, because these come out thicker than the Tamiya paints or tester spray, whatever the case may be. It's very easy if you're a little too close and if you have a little pause in your spray motion, these will glob out the details on tiny 1/35th scale pieces. On larger scale kits, like I said, as long as you remember to keep your distance when you spray and just move quick, which you should be doing with any spraying, these will work just fine for you. Now, because there's a lot of big parts and there's a lot of stuff for building this London bus, I went to this route and just figured I'd show you what I have so far. Now, almost everything I'm going to show you started with a base coat of this flat black, which I basically use as my primer. I did not use the gray as of yet, and I don't foresee using it on this kit, but this is another option, so I just put it out there so we can put that aside. For priming fine detail parts, as I said, I do not stick with these types of paints. I do go for the Tamiya, and Tamiya Surface Primer is a great alternative for priming fine detailed parts, especially when you go into 1/35th and smaller scales. So take that away as well. So this is what's left, and this is what I have used so far in combination. So we have the frame, was a primer of the flat black and then some Tamiya semi-gloss black to give this a little more interest to it. The engines, hit this with the flat black and then came back with this Rust-Oleum flat aluminum. I really like this, and you've seen me use this on probably almost every model I've done for the channel. So yeah, after just that basic assembly, I went and sprayed those, so those are good. Then I use this, they call this a satin nickel Krylon, but I find this works pretty good as a spray substitute for like a more steel color. So I use this for various exhaust elements, drivetrain elements. You see the differential and the drive shaft, and not because I necessarily believe that these are made out of steel in the actual bus, but I have often said in my build videos, when it comes to color selection, I am more interested in creating contrast to accentuate detail than to be 100% color accurate. That's my choice in my builds. You know, obviously that's a decision for everyone, but for your individual builds, but this is the way I like to do it, so that when it's together, you know, things are discernible from each other. Now, my surprise in this was, as I was digging around in my garage trying to clean things up one day, I found an old can of this Rust-Oleum bright chrome. So I thought, you know what, let me give that a shot for all these various elements, the handrails and the seats frames themselves. And I gotta tell you, for a paint that's been sitting on a shelf in my garage for I don't even know how many years, I'm pretty happy with this. This looks pretty good, and it is a nice offset, let's say, to the flat aluminum. This does have a bit of a deeper luster to it, which looks more like chrome. It's not reflective chrome, but as far as I'm concerned for doing a model, this is a nice metallic alternative. So we have those, And it's, as I showed before, there are multiples of these, so the multiples are all painted. Now here, primarily the interest on this are the wheels, and I have just done these in the Rust-Oleum flat black. These will later be painted a darker red, but I wanted the black base coat to really give some definition to that red going into these wheels. So that is that. And then for our seats is just the flat black again. Front, back, spray, spray, more spray, and they are done. So with that stuff out of the way, I can now actually get into more of the building rather than just doing this preliminary painting. I did spend, after doing the base assemblies for these two engines, I did spend quite a bit of time just looking and going through the instructions, going through the parts, figuring out how I wanted to section my sprues to make this painting a little bit more economical, a little more effective, you know, for in terms of time economy. So that said, now I can start painting, start building. See, painting is on my mind. So now I can get into the building. As I go through the build, I'll address another stage of painting, but at this point I think the spray painting is basically concluded, and anything else I'll be doing at this point will be airbrushing. Speaking of which, I heard about these, which, not that it's any kind of a secret, these Ammo Atom paints for airbrushing. So gonna give these a shot on this kit. What drew my attention to this, Andy's Hobby Headquarters did a great you know, experiment with these, and Andy went through, and you know, the claims for these paints were attention grabbing, certainly for me, because they stressed typically one coat coverage, no prime needed, you know, it's based, they're acrylic, so it's, you know, no vapor, no you know, no toxic vapor like a lacquer paint or something like that, or oil-based paint, and simple cleanup. So being that they are acrylic, and I am only interested in putting acrylic through my airbrush to keep my cleanup not so toxic, I figured I would give these colors a try and see how they work. So this is what I'm going to use, this carmine for the darker red on the wheels and certain parts of the interior, and I got a red and a blood red. Very minor difference between the two, but I wasn't sure, you know, looking at a color swatch versus actually how it's going to look when it's painted, which way to go. But I think I'm going to use the plain red and give that a shot. These do need a little bit of dilution for painting. Apparently 7 parts paint, 3 parts of the thinner, according to Andy. Worked out just fine with his airbrush, so that's what I'm going to try with initially for mine. And the other great thing with these are you can also use them for brush painting for your touch-ups. So just like I had mentioned when I talked about using Tamiya bottle paints for my airbrushing, you know, you'll have a color match, guaranteed color match, going from your airbrush to your brush on. They are also supposed to be self-leveling, so even when you do manually brush them on, the brush strokes are supposed to go away. So those are a lot of big promises. And I guess I'm gonna find out when I put them to work on this kit. Alrighty. Okay, welcome to the body shop. So what I am doing here to try to take out the warp of the floor pan, I just used a piece of wood here and some carpenter clamps there. So attaching the frame and clamping the whole thing to the wood, because I know the wood is straight. So hopefully this will take some of the banana out of this big pan piece. And then once this is dry, so probably going to leave this overnight to give this a good long drying time. Once this is done, then the floor pan I will put on there, also clamp and glue to the wood. And by the time that is done, hopefully, this should be pretty well straightened out. I don't expect it to be perfect because it is, pieces can true each other as you glue them together to make a sandwich like plywood. But if everything still has an overall shape, you're going to end up, and I expect to end up with a little banana effect here that lingers. But once I put on the side pieces and the rest of the assembly should true it out. So it's a work in progress. When you're dealing with large, not necessarily large assemblies, but large pieces like this, plastic is what plastic is. And to my experience in working with larger things, I have never come across something that is perfectly true. There's always some kind of twist, warp, combination thereof. If they were really careful with the kit in the manufacturing process, that will be less, but it will most likely still be there. If parts were taken out of their molds very quickly and the plastic was still soft and they were immediately packaged and put in the box, you're probably going to have more warp as the pieces settle in the box and assume that what will become now their final shape. But again, plastic being plastic, a little encouragement, and you can get it back to where you need it. So like I said, let this sit overnight and that should be pretty good. As far as underbody detail, it is a bus. It's not a race car or anything like that. I do usually like to play with undercarriage detail. That is something that I enjoy doing on my cars and trucks and whatnot. But this being the bus and a double-decker bus, I really don't see this being, or even see myself for that matter, flipping it over to take a look at the underbody so that often. So there is some detail here, and since it's here, I did do some work with it, but it's a couple of different metallic tones. I did the fuel tank in a dark gray, did some black wash on the drive shaft and universal joints, but I'm not going to go crazy down here. For some people who are really detail crazy, there may be some criticism here because, there could have been a lot more detail on this front suspension, the transmission. These are basically just large block moldings or assembly, or not assembly, but pieces. But, we do have functioning steering here. And even though it doesn't deflect much, you do get a little bit of deflection. And for that, to give the kit a solid stance when it's done, I think they had no choice but to go with a fairly simple representation of the suspension. I mean, when the kit is assembled, the big tire is going to be here. And again, it really doesn't lend itself for looking at the undercarriage. So, what you don't know about, you don't lose. The engine bay, the engine's going to sit in there. So we have some minimal detail there, but there's more assembly to go on there anyway. So that is that. And then what we do have, which I really wanted to show you, are these two engines that come with the kit. And these are really nice. There's a fair number of parts. And this is the Scania engine, which is the newer engine that was fitted to the buses. So I won't be using this one. I'm going to be using the Leyland, which I'll pull out in a moment. But you do end up with a nice engine, and I just did some detail painting. These are big truck engines, so they are basically a big metallic blob in terms of color, but I went with the paint suggestions in the instructions and just did a little bit of detailing on my own. This is supposed to be red. I'm not trying to make this a Ferrari engine, but yeah, and they build up nice. Now, there is no fan. There is no clutch bell because you only get singles of those pieces, and I am saving them for the actual engine I am going to use, which is our Leyland. And I think this built up really nice. The yellow fan, I did go on the internet and do a little research for these Leyland engines to see how they looked. And I saw a teardown of the classic Leyland engine, and surprise, surprise, it had a yellow fan. So whether that was an after edition or whatever, but I just thought, oh, it's a little bit of color to add, so I'll go with it. I also saw almost like a brass colored exhaust pipe, so I figured I'd go with that, and I just added a little clear blue to give it some look of, what's it called? I forget the word, but to give the heat tempering look of the color of the metal. And this side is very blah, but this side is going to be going right up against the driver's side engine panel, so you really won't be able to see much here, which I guess is why they put all the doodads for the engine on this side so that they would be more serviceable, in the actual bus. The only thing I would point out here, as I come closer, you see this little decal here for the fuel fill. That decal you're just supposed to cut and with white glue stick it on the part, and I thought that is not going to work well at all. So what I did, I cut a small piece of stock styrene, a little square, put the decal on the square, and then put the decal onto the put the piece on the fuel shutoff. So that decal has, an actual mounting onto plastic. It's not just sitting there flimsy. And then, of course, a dab of dull coat just to seal the decal in. But I think that engine came out pretty nice. So that's where we're at. Back to it. So now you can see, reverse the clamping, and now have the basic floor in there, mated to the chassis pan. And the wood, again, is just to make sure this will dry as straight as I can get it. And I had to go with a shorter piece of wood because, I need to fit inside this flooring area. The engine I was going to leave out, but just to note that with the floor glued in place here, it's a bit of a tight fit getting that engine in, and being that it's all built and painted, I didn't want to damage it. So I put that in. It's really not a big deal because when I go to airbrush the different colors for this, I can just cover this area with some masking tape and saran wrap, and that will be all protected. And onward it goes. More clamping underneath. And this too now, I will let sit for a day, and then I can finish up the underbody work and do the airbrushing, and it will start to look like a bus, a little bit. All right, so the next phase of the body shop. Now, I have the floor pan dried to the frame and whatnot underneath, but I have also now clamped the rear portion of the frame extension, and that now can all continue to dry. Added the radiator, a few more of the under chassis parts. So this too, gonna let that dry, give that a good long period to set. And I think just looking at it, you can see it's looking fairly level at this point. So sandwiching, clamping, using a piece of wood as a reference seems to be doing the trick. And that's at this point. So as the kit gets built up and the side pieces go on and whatnot, two things. One, it should help to straighten it out. And two, it'll show just how far off I am right now. So it's, as I've said, it's a self-correcting procedure. So that's that part. Now the other thing, because I have time on my hands while that is drying, I figured I would get started with the seats. So there are a total of 32 seats that you need to build and install into the bus. And depending where they go in the bus is which pieces they use. And the pieces are basically just a seat cushion and a seat frame. So what I've done is start one set of them, and these go together pretty simply. What I did, I wrote on the bottom in gel pen 39. So these are the seats that are built in step 39. So once I have these built and the subsequent sets of seats, I'll label them with their own step number so that I can keep these organized. And that's important because you need to know which ones are going in the right places. Otherwise, you're going to have a problem. I don't want a problem. But these just simply glue in. They give you these nice locator marks on the bottom, locator wedges. They glue in like that. And then the back of the seat glues to this top rail. And that's a nifty little bus bench. Of course, the decals go on for the fabric. And when it is time to mount the seat, we have these legs. And these sit into these mounting holes on the floor pan. And this little notch right here lines up with a notch in the seat. So that will all locate. And then on the seat frame, this peg mounts into the side wall of the bus body. So that should all locate well. Now in the instructions, they show you to attach that little leg piece while you build the chairs, but I am not going to do that because I want to see first how dry fitting that's all going to line up between the side of the bus, the legs of the seat, and the seats themselves. And then I can just glue it in one shot, legs to the seat, into the bus, into the sidewall, done. So that will work out. So while that's drying, I'll get back to doing some seats and see how that goes. Okay, so lots of painting, and now here is where we are. So I was hoping to do this in one video, one episode, but not going to happen. Reason being, there is just a lot of painting to be done here, and what I decided to do was assemble to a certain point, and I've just been painting, as probably suggested from the few clips before this. But what I wanted to point out at the conclusion of the first half of this build is, if you're going to get into something like this, not necessarily this bus, but you got to make sure you have a lot of space, because once you start painting, there's stuff everywhere. So if I pull back a little bit, so I've got my table here, and normally I'm not keeping these here, I just put these out for the conclusion here. But over here I have a bunch of seats and the driver's cab that I've done, and then over there more seats, and then in here I have some interior roof that I've painted, some of the interior sidewalls that I've painted, and even down here on the floor some of the body panels that I have painted. At this point, those are mostly the interior body panels that I need to proceed with assembly. The big sides I have not done yet, although I did do gray on the inside around the windows. So it's a lot, and there's certainly a lot of planning to consider. Now, in comparison to, let's say, a military model where you're building a tank, as I've done on the channel, you can do a lot of assembly because most of the things are going to be the same color. Here, because the interior is multiple colors, that's multiple maskings, multiple rounds of paint. So I've spent quite a bit of time with this, just planning out how I'm going to do the painting, which colors, what sequence to make the masking easier, and basically did it in the sequence I showed in the video clips, the montage of the painting. But in general, when you're working with colors, you want to start with your lighter colors and work out to your darker colors, the exception being the metallics, which look just so much better with the black undercoat. But it's easier to cover a light color with a dark color rather than cover a dark color with a light color, so you start with the lighter colors first. And I did the light gray, the darker gray, and then moved on from there. One thing I did, which was a little bit of experimentation, the the warning edges of the steps and whatnot, I did those with a Tamiya flat yellow, and then went over them with a Tester's turn signal amber to give it a little bit of color texture, and I think that came out pretty good. Got the wheels on, so we actually have a rolling machine, and yes, we do get some steering on those front wheels, which is cool. And as I said before, the underbody, it's going to be pretty simple because it is a bus, and we're really not going to be seeing much of this once the kit is done. But the detail is there, as I said. Engines all tucked away in there. One thing I want to take a closer look at is this driver's cab, which is such a neat little assembly. Lots of good detail in there, and that should look really nice once it's in the cab and the assembly is done. I love that it has all these giant windows around it, so none of that detail will be lost in there. That will all be visible upon completion of the kit. So at this point, I'm going to go into the second half of this build. And probably going to do a lot more painting and just get that out of the way. I've basically shown what I've been doing, so I'm going to keep on doing that, and then get more into just straight out assembly. In terms of build time versus painting time, you need instructions. Got to study instructions because that is the best way to figure out how you're going to coordinate building, painting, when to stop building, switch to painting, when to call it quits with painting, switch back to building. A lot of playing with parts because of the way this kit builds, where it's whole interior sections that you build with interior panels and then outer panels that come over them. Had to figure out what is viewable of these panels front and back, which colors they need to be painted, and to coordinate all of that. So that said, gonna get back to it. See you at the next episode for more of the building, and until then, thanks for watching and enjoy your hobby.
Like and subscribe.
And there we go. That's it. Captain style. Yes, please do like and subscribe. All right, goodbye.